You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 148. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Have you ever asked yourself how your life might be different if you were a coach instead of a lawyer? The reason I ask you that question is because I used to ask myself that question. When I was a practicing lawyer and I had learned about coaching, I started meeting coaches, I started learning about coaches, and I would often ask myself whether or not they experienced life the same way as coaches as they experienced their lives before they became coaches. What were the tools they were using? Did they still have challenges in their life? What was that like for them? So today I am going to answer some of those questions for you. I'm going to focus on what coaching can and cannot do, specifically as it applies to lawyers and the lawyers that I work with. I'm going to share a little bit about my experiences as a coach and as a lawyer, as well as the lawyers that I work with. And I'm delighted to have you here with me. I'm so glad you've joined me. Welcome to the podcast. We are going to dive into the episode and it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, the reason that I decided to talk about this topic in particular this week is that I am going through a particularly challenging time in my life right now. And I'm not saying this because I want sympathy or because it's any different from what anybody else is experiencing. I know that we all have ebbs and flows. And right now I'm in one of those flow stages. I'm thrilled about many aspects of it. I've got a number of new projects at work that I'm getting involved in, and there's some initial startup in terms of getting organized, in terms of organizing my calendar, in terms of figuring out how I'm going to do the things that I want to do. And this is great. These are beautiful opportunities that I'm excited to get involved in, much like you are excited about some of the new projects that are on your plate. And it also means that there's a increased level of activity that I need to adapt to in terms of my professional work. I also have some trainings that I'm taking, which are trainings I'm really excited about. I might have mentioned I'm taking another ADHD coaching course, thrilled about that. And that's also an additional commitment in my calendar every week. Now, in terms of other areas of my life, I've mentioned before, I've got two kids, they're 9 and 11, and they have things that they need to do, and I'm supporting them as their mother. And so that is an increase in my responsibilities. They have spring break coming up in just a few days. So there's 2 weeks where they will not be in school. We're taking a family vacation for one of those weeks. And as you can imagine, I need to wrap things up at work this week so that I'm ready for that 2-week break. So if you've ever gone through that experience, which I'm guessing you have, of trying to get ready for a trip, trying to get ready for a vacation or time off, it can be really challenging to get everything all tied up nicely so that you can leave and feel peaceful about life at the office when you are not there. Now, in addition to children, I've also got my parents, and my mom recently underwent a procedure. My mom is amazing. She was on podcast episode 100. We talked about her screenwriting and storytelling. Anyhow, she's great. She's fine. But there's that additional layer of, is she okay? Making sure that I can help out here and there. So I have been experiencing all these different things, all kind of coalescing in one space. And I feel overwhelmed. I feel like there's a lot on my plate. I feel like, how am I going to do all of this? And so I wanted to share that with you because this is maybe how you are feeling. And I can tell you about some of the tools and strategies and how things are different for me now relative to before coaching. And also what isn't different, right? If you are thinking about working with a coach, for example, and there's a particular thing you're trying to achieve, this might really help you delineate what your coach can and cannot help you with. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention here is that I feel in some ways like I am the almost, what is that word again? Cliche, almost like a cliche mid-career professional, right? I think for any of you who are about my vintage, I'm almost 47. I've got, as I mentioned, the kids, the parents, the career, and all that goes along with that. And I've always thought of this stage of life almost like a perfect storm scenario, right? Where everything is coalescing all at once. All your responsibilities are heightening all at once. And so it can feel like you're being pulled in many different directions. So if you're at my stage, you might be able to resonate with some of the things that I'm talking about in terms of what's happening in my personal life. And for lawyers who are at different stages, there are different challenges that you face, right? Those early years of practice where everything is brand new. You don't have a lot of control over your time. You are trying to build relationships. You are trying to establish yourself in terms of your reputation, of your abilities, your clients, etc. If you're reaching maybe the partnership stage, right? Where you are increasing your responsibilities at work. You are growing a team. You're increasingly mentoring others. You are delegating more. You are more focused on your business development, etc. So there are always going to be stages of your life that are going to have more heightened activity than others. And so again, you might find yourself in situations that feel really challenging. And how could this coaching lens help you with that? So today I'm going to explain a little bit about what coaching is, and then I'm going to go through a number of examples of how coaching can help you and how it cannot. And I've got 5 examples to share with you. So diving into coaching and what it is, I think the most helpful place to start is the International Coaching Federation definition of coaching. And here is how they define coaching. They say it is the partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So this should not surprise you. It's this idea of partnering with somebody. It is thought-provoking. There's creativity involved. There's inspiration. And the goal here is for you as the client to maximize your personal and your professional potential. And there are certain stages of a coaching conversation. There are certain goals that I have as your coach in terms of what we're looking to achieve. Things that coaches do, they help raise awareness, they listen, they provide feedback, they make observations about the language choices that you make, the body language that you exhibit. If your energy seems to go up, your coach might point that out to you. If your body language and energy seems to go down, then they would point that out to you. There are the partnering components of figuring out what to do next. What are the action steps that you might want to take? There is the process of anticipating obstacles and thinking about how to overcome those obstacles. There's the questions around how you're going to celebrate when you achieve your goal, etc. So there are lots of things, lots of components that happen within a coaching conversation with your coach. Now, what I also wanted to highlight here is that I see coaching as something that can happen in a traditional coaching relationship, a coach and a client. And there are other ways that you can also receive coaching. Now, one of those would be in a group scenario, and that's something that I've talked about on the podcast before. And I think there are some pretty neat benefits that come to working in a group. For example, seeing somebody else work through one of their questions with a coach can be really neat because you watch that as an observer. You're typically not as involved or invested in the problem, and so you can see it a little bit more objectively. And it might be something that resonates with you, a problem that you can relate to. And so when you see somebody else describing it, it's like you can connect with it on a different level because you're not in it yourself. And then you can see how the way that they approach the problem might be different from how you would approach the problem. So there's some pretty neat things that happen in a group coaching environment. So that's another flavor of coaching. And then there's also the idea of self-coaching. And this is something that I really strongly believe in. It's something that I practice for myself. It's when you sit down and literally have a conversation with yourself. Now, this can be through a journaling practice. It can be through asking yourself particular questions and answering those questions. It doesn't have to be journaled. You don't have to write down the answers. But what I see as a self-coaching practice is where you raise your own awareness, right? I mean, it's not exactly the same as having somebody else do this with you. You might imagine going for a massage and, you know, the masseuse is trained and they know kind of what to do and they can massage those parts of your back that you can't actually reach yourself. But if you have a sore arm and you rub your arm and kind of knead the muscles with your fingers, you can, in effect, give yourself somewhat of a massage, or you can give yourself a massage. And so I wanted to include this, right? This idea of self-coaching, of asking yourself questions. I would include that in my definition of coaching. I think that is all wrapped up in it. So when we go through the list of things that coaching can and cannot do, I'm thinking of all three categories. They will apply differently depending on the question, but I'd love for you to have those in mind as we go through the discussion. And again, I would invite you to think about you in your life, right? If you're listening to this podcast episode and you're listening to it because there's something that's going on in your practice where you're thinking about having a coach help you out, that is great. Think about that problem in relation to what I'm about to share with you, because it's going to help you start to arrive at some ideas and some solutions for you. So for example, you might be looking to switch your jobs, right? You're sitting in a job right now and you're kind of happy, but not all that happy. You're maybe having some issues with some of your colleagues. You're wondering about your long-term potential at that particular place. Maybe the work that you're doing doesn't align with your longer-term objectives. Maybe there's a ceiling there and you want to move past that ceiling. That could be something that you would like to get coaching on. Confidence, right? You might feel like you're really struggling at work, that you struggle with imposter syndrome, you struggle with self-doubt. It's starting to hold you back from putting yourself forward for opportunities. Your work is more stressful than you want it to be because you're constantly second-guessing yourself. You're feeling a lot of pressure to meet expectations that maybe are unrealistic. And so you may want to work with a coach to help you develop some strategies in terms of how to approach your work with greater confidence. You might have a practice that feels very reactive, right? You might feel a little bit like I've been feeling these past few days, where there's a lot on my to-do list and I'm trying to figure out how to get all of these things done while maintaining my sanity, right? And this might be you. You might be in a practice where things are coming at you from all different directions. You're trying to schedule, you're trying to make plans, and it's just not sticking. And so maybe a coach could help you figure out how to organize your practice, how to set priorities, how to set boundaries, etc. So these are all areas where you might be thinking, okay, how could a coach actually help me here? And so we're going to get some clarity around that. Now, I mentioned I've got a list. I've got 5 examples altogether. So we're going to start with example number 1. And it's kind of like, when you read a magazine and it's like what to wear, what not to wear. It's almost like that kind of a list. But let's start with item number 1, which is, what can coaching do? Well, coaching can help you raise awareness. And I have 3 ways that coaching can help you with awareness. Number 1 is this idea of being a fish in water. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at the fish, my son recently got fish. So I actually get to regularly look at these fish. They're swimming around in their tank. The fish don't see the water, right? Me as an observer, I can see the water. I can see the days that the water is really clear. I can see the days that the water is maybe a little bit more cloudy. But to them, they're not noticing any of this. And for you, chances are you are in your own version of a fishbowl, right? When you step into your organization, there is a certain culture that goes on within that organization that maybe was really apparent to you when you first started working there. But now after a few years, it all is just part of the water. It's something that you don't even see. Now, an example that came to mind for me is even the nature of work. Now, when I was practicing as a lawyer, this was pre-pandemic. The idea of work was actually going to the office and working. So I spent a lot of time sitting in my office, my physical office that was in downtown Vancouver. And when I went on mat leaves, maternity leaves for my children, I was no longer checking into an office Monday to Friday and sometimes on the weekends. Instead, I was roaming the streets with a stroller Monday to Friday, and I was looking at all these people thinking, what are these people doing? Why are they not at work? Why are they not sitting in an office? To me, it was completely unreal, right? It was bizarre to me that there were these humans who were out there on the streets Monday to Friday during business hours. So in a sense, that was me in my fishbowl. I was so accustomed to this life of working inside of an office that anything else just seemed bizarre to me. And things are different now, right? With remote work. And I'm at a different stage in my life where I now primarily work from home. And so my viewpoint on that has completely shifted. But that's an example where I was a fish in water. And you might think about where you are a fish in water currently. So working with a coach can help you raise awareness of what you might be accepting as just the way the world works that maybe is more of a paradigm or a container or a culture than it seems to you. Another area where coaching can raise awareness is awareness about your thinking. So metacognition is an executive functioning skill. According to Peg Dawson, I mentioned I saw her speak a couple of weeks ago here in Vancouver. She's amazing. She talks about executive function, and she's actually given a hierarchy to the different functions that we have within our brain. And executive functions are the skills that allow us to execute, to accomplish tasks. And she named metacognition as the highest, most evolved of all of the executive functioning skills. So more than planning or time management or task initiation or emotional regulation, metacognition. And metacognition effectively is thinking about your thinking, right? Thinking about your thoughts. And she had a brilliant way of describing it, in addition to offering this idea that your thoughts can be tools. Brilliant. Thoughts can be tools. And so what coaching can help you with is identifying your thoughts, right? So pre-coaching, I went through my life as a lawyer just thinking that what I was thinking was the way things were, right? It never really truly occurred to me that my thoughts were not necessarily the truth, that they were not necessarily facts, or that thoughts that I were having were perhaps stories more than facts. Now, as lawyers, we have a pretty good understanding of fact versus story, or fact versus opinion. So if you've ever drafted an affidavit, then you know that you're only drafting facts unless you're drafting an expert opinion type of affidavit where you are a qualified expert. You have reached a threshold of authority that you can state an opinion, and that opinion is accepted as fact, or it might lead to a finding of fact. So what I would invite you to think about here is you're thinking about your thinking. And what coaching can do is help you to see your own thinking. And when you step back and you observe your thoughts, right? This is very much in line with mindfulness and meditation and observing your thoughts as an observer, as a neutral third party instead of the person who is attached to those thoughts. You can create a lot of space. You can understand yourself better. You can understand why it is that you're reacting a certain way in a situation. And so it gives you that greater objectivity. So an example of this is when you procrastinate, for example. You might just procrastinate right now and you think, oh, this is a problem that I have. I procrastinate. It's really annoying. I really wish I didn't do that because I'm always scrambling to get things done at the last minute. So that might be your story to yourself about procrastination. And what this increased awareness is helpful for is to actually uncover some of the thoughts that may be contributing to your procrastination. So it may be that there's a voice inside your head that when you sit down to write a brief, there's a voice inside you that's saying, this brief is going to take forever. And you are going to write this brief and it's not going to be good enough. And there's all these other things that you could be doing right now that are way more fun than writing this brief. And you know what? You should go do them. You could do that because you're still going to have a few hours left after doing that. It's only a few minutes. So there's actually an internal dialogue that may be happening that is leading to you procrastinating. And so coaching can help you identify what's going on at that level so that you can gain awareness. And then if you want, change the behavior. So that's the second category of awareness. First of all, there was that fish in water awareness. The second is, what are you thinking awareness? And then there's this third level of awareness, which is understanding yourself better. Now, this is something, again, that I did not have a lot of awareness of when I was practicing as a lawyer, right? I just kind of went through my life as a lawyer. I had some sense of what I was interested in. I had an idea that I wanted to practice commercial litigation as opposed to a more niche type of litigation. I knew I wanted to work in an office downtown versus working at an office, I don't know, a home office, for example, at that time. There were certain things that resonated with me. So certain types of files that I found were less comfortable for me. So files where I was dealing with people's emotions, I did not like those files. I took on the weight of those emotions. I felt badly if I had to examine somebody and they burst into tears. I didn't like that feeling. So I moved into more of a commercial type of practice where people were not so emotionally attached to the outcome of the case. So there were certain indications in my practice that guided me to the areas that I ultimately practiced in. But I didn't do this with the same level of awareness that I do now. So what the awareness can be when you're working with a coach is that idea of diving into your own values, right? What is it that is important to you? What are some of your strengths, right? I will ask lawyers when they start working with me, name your strengths, name some of your strengths, name some of your weaknesses. This is in my intake form. And everybody can tell me their weaknesses, no problem. But when it comes to strengths, a lot of lawyers will struggle to identify what their strengths are because they don't know what they are. They don't feel comfortable sharing them with me. And yet when you know what your strengths are, when you know what your relative weaknesses are, then you have so much more data that you can use to figure out how to move forward, right? How can you leverage your strengths? How can you compensate for or plan for areas that are less strong? These are all really great things to know to help you move forward. So your coach can help you do that. Now, as I mentioned, I would include self-coaching in my description of coaching. I do that for myself. I ask myself what is going on here when I'm struggling. For example, yesterday I was feeling really overwhelmed with my schedule. And so I would sit down with my schedule. I would ask myself some questions. What matters most here? Why is it that I feel so overwhelmed? I can, in effect, give myself a conversation like that. I work with coaches. I have coaches that coach me. And I love that. I love having increased awareness of what's going on for me. And you can do this for yourself. So these are all ways that coaching can help. Now, what coaching cannot do, right? And this is really where I was yesterday. What was the big difference here is coaching cannot change the environment that you are in, right? If you are having challenges with a particular colleague, coaching isn't going to change that colleague. That colleague is still going to be that colleague. What is different is the way that you interact with that colleague, the way that you perceive your relationship with that colleague, the way that you see opportunities for that colleague, what your options are, what some strategies might be. It may also be that, again, your environment stays the same. So there are still the same opportunities out there for lawyers, but your experience of those opportunities might be different. And so let's say you have that additional increase in awareness about yourself. So let's say you're a litigator and you hate going to court. Well, maybe when you do that deep dive and you understand what your values are, you might see, well, okay, what I really value is helping people. And what I really value is being able to affect positive change in the world. I love learning. I love creativity. I mean, I'm sort of trying to make this up, but you look at your values and then maybe you look at your strengths, right? And maybe one of your strengths is being really organized and coming up with a really good plan. And a relative weakness might be public speaking. I'm, again, just coming up with a hypothetical example on the spot here. So you may still have that job as a litigator, right? Where you're thinking, okay, this is really hard for me. I don't want to do this, but you might get your values realigned, right? Or you might not have to realign them, but you just have greater awareness of them. So you might say, well, I'm not probably the most gifted natural public speaker out there, but it is really important to me that I advance my client's case. And the way that I want to do that is through litigation. So I'm willing to put myself in that position. I'm willing to put my values, right? I'm willing to let my values be a source of energy, a source of inspiration, a source of motivation so that I can force myself to do things that are otherwise potentially hard for me so I can build those skills because the overall outcome matters to me. So the act of preparing and going to court hasn't really changed, right? You're still doing it, but now you're doing it with a greater level of awareness. You're doing it with intentionality. You've got motivation. You understand why you are doing it. And so you can feel more aligned with that task. So again, the environment hasn't changed, but you have changed within your environment. So that was number one. Coaching can help you increase awareness. It will not change what is going on around you. That being said, sometimes, as you will find, when you change, your environment around you starts to change as well. Now, step number 2 is what can coaching do? It can teach you tools. So as a coach, I've now got a whole toolbox full of tools that I bring out when I'm having a coaching conversation with a client. And the tool that I bring will depend on the client and their problem. So for example, if you are struggling with decision making, I have some decision making tools that can help you. So one of those tools, for example, is making lists, right? I'm sure you've done this before. You've got the pros and the cons for leaving your job, the pros and the cons for having having a difficult conversation, the pros and the cons for having a better time management structure. So whatever that looks like for you, I can help you make a decision. So you make your list, and then here's an additional tool that I learned of as a coach is to look at the reasons, right? Because I think we're really good, especially as lawyers, at looking at the logical facts and, which one has better math, which one makes more sense on paper. And we don't always tap into our emotions. We don't tap into our intuition, the inner knowing that one decision maybe favors, is favorable relative to the other. And sometimes when we're making decisions, we place a lot on the math, but we don't necessarily tap into that other component. So if you look at your pros and cons list, let's use leaving your job as an example. Chances are there's a list of pros that will favor staying where you are, right? That it's safe, it's secure, you know what to expect, there's a predictable trajectory, you already know everybody, you've invested a whole bunch of time in it. So there's all these reasons why you'd want to stay. And then you look at leaving and you're looking at, well, what are the risks involved here? Well, I might not succeed. I'll be forced to learn everything from scratch. I lose out on these opportunities, etc. And so you can see how maybe there's a bunch of reasons that are very much in this, stay where you are, stay safe flavor versus I know that I've kind of exhausted my potential here where I am. I've been feeling like I need a move for a while, and there's an opportunity out there that will allow me to grow. There's an exciting possibility that I will join this other organization and move into a leadership role, which is ultimately what I want. So there are reasons that feel a little bit of a different flavor, right? As I'm sharing these with you, you can probably feel that in terms of your own emotional response, right? One is full of possibility, but carries some risk versus that other option, which stays safe, but is a little bit counter to that instinct of wanting to grow. So that's a tool, right? You do your list, but then you ask yourself how you feel about the reasons for your decision. And often you'll see one is motivated by fear and one is motivated by safety. Another area where you might have some tools, procrastination. So I'll just share a couple of them here, but like this idea of procrastinating and having the Pomodoro method, right? You set a timer for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is, and you just force yourself to do something on a project. Maybe you've tried that one before. Or the salami method. And I love talking about the salami method and the Pomodoro method at the same time. It reminds me of making a pizza. The salami method being when you've got a big task, you can slice it up into little chunks and then you start taking that salami one piece at a time. So these are tools, right? I can teach you tools as your coach that would be relevant to the challenge that you happen to be having. What I cannot do as your coach is make you use those tools. Right? So you can imagine you're a boxer in a ring, right? And I like that example because it's so clear, the delineation between the boxer who's fighting the fight. You're the one in the arena. You're the one who's going to court. You're the one who's having the difficult conversations. You're the one who's writing the presentation that you're going to give in front of all your peers in the industry. You are the one who is physically in the ring doing the work. And I am your coach on the sidelines, right? I'm cheering you on. I'm helping you. I can discuss strategy with you, all of that. But ultimately, you're the one who is using the tools or not. So there's a limit to what I can do as your coach. Another analogy that might resonate is this idea of a gym, right? I think of gyms. I don't love gyms myself. I almost never go to them, but they contain machines, right? Strength training machines and weights and all the equipment that you could ever dream of. And for those who go to a gym and make use of those machines, they build the muscle and they achieve their fitness goals, no problem. For people who show up physically at the gym and do not make use of any of those tools or machines, whatever, they're not going to get the results that they want, right? So again, I can offer you the tools. I can take you to the gym, but you are ultimately in control of whether or not you apply those tools and use them to achieve the goals that you have for yourself. So that is number 2. Coaching can help you with tools, but it cannot have you or require you to actually use those tools. So the third thing that coaching can and cannot do, it can help you see what your options are. This comes up for me quite often in terms of career transitions. It also comes up in time management, where lawyers will come to me and they might say to me, can you just tell me what to do? Now, what I can help you do as a coach is I can help you better understand yourself. So if you're looking to make a transition, I can help you understand why you want to make that transition, what is important to you about your next role, what you love about your work, what you don't love about your work. I can help you gain clarity about what options are out there. So you may already have started your path of research to figure out, what would be a better fit for you? What type of organization, what type of law firm, what type of work would be better? What practice areas might be better? I can share with you my own knowledge from having worked with lawyers to help them through transitions. I've got a whole podcast episode about career options for lawyers. So if you're curious about that, you can listen to that. And I can also help you in terms of giving yourself permission. So this is something that I think a lot of lawyers need, especially lawyers who are making career transitions or big decisions that will impact not just themselves, but others. They will often feel, and maybe you feel this way sometimes, like you need somebody else to give you the green light to go ahead with it, right? I had this experience when I ultimately left practice of law, right? I felt like I needed permission to do that. I don't know whose permission I thought I needed. Maybe my parents, maybe my colleagues, maybe my husband. I don't know. It never really occurred to me to ask myself for permission. But as your coach, I can help you give yourself permission to make a move, right? What I cannot do and what coaching does not do is offer you a drop-down menu, a multiple choice option, whatever that happens to look like, where I tell you what to do. And I have had clients and potential clients be frustrated with me because of that, because they wanted to come to me and have me tell them exactly what to do, what career they would be better suited for, what jobs they would be better suited for. They wanted to kind of give me a description of what they were experiencing and, what they liked, what they wanted. Actually, not even what they wanted. They didn't themselves know what they wanted. So they wanted me to tell them what they wanted. And so it's really tricky, as you can imagine, to do that for somebody, right? And I think there are diagnostic tests that you can do. I don't do those. I don't administer them, but sort of diagnostic tests where you fill in the bubble sheet and it spits out an answer like you should be a lawyer, you should be a litigator, you should be an aircraft, pilot, flight attendant, whatever. So there's certain things that will give you job suggestions based on your personality. I cannot do that as your coach. Some coaches might, but that's not what I do. I'm much more of let's explore that question and then help you figure out your path. In my view, you are the expert in your life. You know what you like the best. You know the right path for you. And my job is to help you figure that answer out. And sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's not going to be a linear path. And that is perfectly okay. Now, the same, I mentioned time management as well. That's another area where I will often coach lawyers. Again, there is no one size fits all solution to practice and time management. Everybody's practice looks different. Pile into that the idea that every human is different and has different strengths and different weaknesses, different energy levels, different ways of doing things. Some people like paper, some people like electronic. So the goal isn't to tell you, here's how you need to do things. It's helping you discover what method is going to work best for you. And you can see how this is all building, right? First, you start with that level of awareness, like what is the problem? What's going on? What are your strengths? What are your values? What are you looking to accomplish here? We gain all that awareness. Then we move into this idea of some tools. Okay, here's some ideas that could be potentially helpful for you, what actually resonates for you. Then you get to decide on your options. What is going to work best for you? Then we move into this next area, coaching, how I can help, how I cannot help. This idea of supporting you and helping you to define your goal and reach them. So I'm really good at helping other people make plans. This is something that I learned quite early in my coaching practice when one of my first clients had a conversation. She was going in to she was a junior lawyer. She was speaking to management. She had a performance review coming up and she wanted to make a request about something she wanted at work. I can't remember what it was that she wanted, but I do remember sitting down with her at a coffee shop and we basically just outlined the conversation she was going to have, right? Sat down, wrote it out on a piece of paper, handed her the piece of paper. There it was. And I still do that with clients that I work with. They come to me and it's like they have already at an unconscious level digested a lot of the information that we end up talking about, but they haven't reached that next step. It hasn't really crystallized into a plan. And that can happen as we are exchanging words, right? As we are in conversation, sometimes that is enough for someone to realize, okay, I've been thinking about this. And now that I'm actually telling somebody, right? Sometimes them speaking to me is the first time they're voicing something that they want to do out loud, right? It's a brave conversation. It is a bold declaration. And that in itself crystallizes what it is that they want to do. And as I'm saying this to you, I'm thinking of times where this has happened for me. And I'm inviting you to think of times where this has happened for you, right? Those pivotal moments in your life where you say something to somebody and it's like, it crystallizes, right? From that moment onward, your decision has been made. So this can be really powerful in a coaching conversation, right? Where you as the client all of a sudden realize what it is that you want to do. You express it and it sticks. And as a coach, I can help you to figure out what the plan is, right? I can help you reach the decision. I can help you map out the plan. Sometimes I'll send notes to clients where I've broken it down into kind of topics and headings for them, based on what they've told me, right? I'm not the one who's creating the plan. I just happen to capture it and then help them put that in order. So coaches can help you do that, right? They can support you when you have an ongoing coaching relationship with somebody. You might have that really cool experience of knowing you've got a coaching conversation coming up in a couple of weeks. And so in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, well, I know I'm going to meet with Paula in a couple of weeks. So I really want to be able to tell her that I've done this thing, right? I've reached out to that person or I had that difficult conversation and here's how it went. So in the back of your mind, you're thinking about that conversation, you're anticipating the conversation, and that in itself can be really motivating for you to do the things that you have told yourself you want to do. I can help you with that. Coaches can help you with that. Now, where do you draw the line here? Where does coaching stop? Well, coaching, as I mentioned, is not going to be able to change your circumstances. It's not going to be able to make you do things. It's not going to tell you what to do. And so the same is true here when it comes to accountability. I can help you with accountability, but I am not going to be kind of standing next to you, watching you and making sure that you follow through on what it is you said you would do. I cannot make you as a client show up for a coaching conversation, right? If you do not want to do it, you are not going to do it. I cannot do the work for you, right? Going back to that gym analogy, if I'm sitting there lifting the weights, great, I'm lifting the weights and I'm getting stronger. You are not getting stronger. And so what we're not creating is a dependency where I make you do things or your coach makes you do things. Instead, coaching is more about helping you develop that authority in yourself. You develop that relationship of trust with yourself, that when you make a commitment to yourself, you then follow through on that commitment, right? So going back to the ICF definition of of coaching, there's a component of partnership. I will 100% be by your side. I will be helping you. I will help you co-create your plans. I will be there for you. I will be there to hear your progress, hear your updates. But ultimately, you are the boss of you. You are the best authority of yourself. And what I help my clients do through coaching is to develop that accountability for themselves, to find ways for themselves to find motivation if that's what they need, to become accountable to themselves if that's what they need, and to take full responsibility, 100% responsibility for themselves. And going back to that last example of the job transitions, when lawyers come to me and they really want me to tell them what to do, in a sense, they're trying to push the responsibility of the decision onto me, right? Understandably, right? It makes sense that you would want somebody else to make a decision that has such a big impact, right? Especially if it's a risky decision, right? If you are told by somebody else to do something and it doesn't work out, great. Well, Paula didn't really know what she was talking about anyways, right? Or, it's all Paula's fault. She told me to do it. Versus when you are the person who takes on that decision yourself, right? When you develop that sense of ownership over your decisions, then on the one hand, it's this really empowering place to be, right? You are now in control. And the sort of other side of that is that you now have responsibility. So if things don't go exactly the way that you wanted to, or not at all the way that you wanted to, now you've got that responsibility, and that is your responsibility to manage. So that's kind of one of the pros and cons, right? Or the limits of coaching in a sense. not that it's even a con. As I say that, I don't think it's a con, but it's, the expectation that you might go in is that, well, my coach is going to really help me with accountability 100%. We're here to help you with accountability, but ultimately it's helping you be accountable to you. It's not so much that you are accountable to me, right? I'm not parenting in a sense. Even as a parent, at a certain point, I think your children grow to a certain stage where you're more there for support than you are to hold them to follow through on the things that they need to do, right? So that's number 4. So just to recap, in terms of what coaching can and cannot do, it can help you to increase your awareness, but it's not going to change what's going on around you. It can help you learn new tools, but it can't require you or force you to use those tools. Coaching can help you see what your options are. Coaching, at least with me, is not going to tell you which of those is best for you to do. Coaching can help support you and help you create plans to reach your goals and to support you in reaching those goals. But coaching, at least with me, it cannot force you to follow through on those goals. That is ultimately up to you. And then finally, the 5th example that I am here to share with you today is dealing with obstacles. So coaching can help you when it comes to your obstacles, right? I think when we have obstacles, they are a signal. They are a learning opportunity. I've done a whole podcast episode. I listened to it yesterday actually, because in my group coaching program, we're talking about obstacles today. So it's fresh on my mind. And so the podcast episode is all about obstacles and how one of the points I make is that it's kind of a victim of bad marketing, right? We see obstacles as this thing that we should, avoid, when actually there's a lot of growth in these obstacles. So anyhow, as your coach, I can help you with those obstacles, right? I mean, when you face obstacles, anytime you set a big goal for yourself, the obstacles are going to come up, right? That is just how it works, right? The bigger the goal, the bigger the obstacles. So you can try to avoid obstacles, right? You can avoid change. You can avoid setting big goals. You can avoid doing things differently and try to maintain the status quo and live a life free of obstacles. I would offer to you that it's so unlikely to happen. Things will change around you, whether or not you want them to. And so chances are the obstacles, if you don't go looking for them, they will find you. And when you don't give yourself that opportunity to put yourself into the obstacle, right? To deal with the obstacle, to learn the skills, you're kind of missing out on opportunities to gain confidence, to gain resilience, to learn how to deal with obstacles. So I see obstacles as great learning opportunities. I think that they can be great opportunities to figure out how to be strategic. So kind of figuring out your how-to, right? If you want to have better time management, you might look at what are some of the strategies that you could use to do that, right? Scheduling, how you schedule your days, how you organize your day based on your energy levels, how you use anchors in your day. So I've done 27 podcast episodes about time management. So if you have any questions about time management, I would encourage you to look at some of those episodes. I've got a podcast roadmap I created recently. I'll link to that in the notes to this show, which could help you with that. But again, if you're thinking about time management, so there are some tactical strategy, obstacle overcoming things you can do to better manage your time. And what I can also help you with as a coach is a deeper, more transformational change when it comes to obstacles. So you might think of strategy as the how, like how can you deal with your time management problems? And then there's the who, right? And this can come through with coaching as well. This is where coaching can be really, really powerful. So not only can I help you at a more surface level with like, okay, how do I structure my calendar? But dealing with the deeper challenges, the deeper obstacles that come up when you go to implement some of those changes, right? So we know that creating a calendar can help. Setting boundaries can help. Setting priorities can help. But those conversations can be really difficult, right? If you set up your calendar and you've told yourself you're not working after 6 and a new client comes in and they want to work with you, but they can only speak to you at 7:00 that night, you need to make a decision, right? Are you going to have that conversation with the client, the one that they want to have, or are you going to set up a boundary and have that conversation the following day? Having a boundary, setting a boundary might be difficult for you. And that might be based on some internal beliefs about setting boundaries, about your availability, about not wanting to disappoint people. And so the coaching, right? The obstacles and the coaching around the obstacles can help you with the tactics, and it can help you with some of the underlying beliefs, right? Going back to that awareness, what do you believe to be true about someone who sets obstacles? What are you thinking about obstacles that might be holding you back? I can help with that type of thing. So those are all ways that coaching, again, sort of going back to what coaching helps with, what it doesn't help with. So what it cannot do is prevent obstacles from coming into your life. So I mentioned over the past few days, I have really struggled with managing my time, managing my energy, figuring out what my priorities are. Am I aligned in the long term with some of the things that I'm doing right now? How does this align with my long-term goals as a coach? You might be asking yourself the same questions, right? The obstacles might be flying at you, right? It feels like you're in your office and they're just coming at you, whether they're in your email inbox or people are coming in, dropping things off with you, or you receive a call from the school and you need to go pick your child up because they're not feeling well. And your parents just called and there's a family reunion next week and you need to be there and you need to bring chicken salad and whatever it happens to be. So you can see yourself sitting in this world. The obstacles are still going to come, right? And when you figure out how to deal with one stage of obstacle, that might not prevent, or that will not prevent, I should say, other types of obstacles from coming your way, or the next layer of obstacle, right? You can imagine yourself in a video game and you just keep getting to the next level and the next level, and the dragon that you have to kill at the end of the whatever adventure you do gets bigger and bigger every time. And so coaching can help you to see what the obstacles are and to strategize around the obstacles, to figure out what might be going on beneath the surface in terms of those obstacles, but it's not going to mean that those obstacles don't come around. So going back to my original question, right? Is life different as a coach relative to being a lawyer pre-coaching? And for me, the answer is that actually life can still be really challenging, right? It can still feel overwhelming. It can still feel like there's a lot going on and, almost like a head spinning type of situation. But the difference between pre-coaching for me and post-coaching is that I now have much greater awareness about what I'm thinking about the problem, where I ultimately want to go in the longer term. It helps me to better understand what values are at play, right? If there's that sense of conflict, well, what's going on here? It helps me to see how things that I want for my life, right? If I look at my family, my children, my parents, my friends, my spouse, all the people in my life, if I'm thinking about myself too, right? What health goals I have for myself, what bucket list items I have for my life, etc. If I look at all of that, right, and try to contextualize what's happening in the shorter term, right? I can see how the short term and the long term align or do not align. It helps with decision making. So I've got these tools at my disposal. And yes, there are still challenges, right? There are still challenges, but I have more tools to help me deal with those challenges. I make more conscious decisions about those challenges. I'm more self-aware. I'm able to have more difficult conversations. I'm able to see how I'm going to get myself out of that situation. So today I have a very clear list of priorities in terms of what I'm tackling and when. And, this episode, recording this episode for you is top priority. This is the first thing I'm doing today because I really want to do this and it's important to me. And I sort of have other things planned as well. So now I'm kind of getting into way too much detail, but I wanted to answer that question for you because if this is something that you have wondered, right? You are wondering, would it help me to work with a coach or not? Hopefully this episode has given you some indication about, yeah, actually it could help me with this thing and it's not going to help me with that thing. And so now that expectation is there. And of course, this is me talking. This is me in my coaching practice. There may be other coaches who do things differently, and I'm sure they all do, right? Just like all lawyers they're called lawyers, but you all practice very differently. You all have your individual strengths and the ways that you like to do things that may be different from others. And so, take this with a grain of salt. But ultimately, I think a lot of the themes here apply to the coaching role and what you could expect. And if it does raise particular questions, and let's say you're working with another coach or you want to work with a different coach, hopefully this has helped you to figure out some of the questions that you might be asking in terms of how you can expect that relationship to unfold. And maybe I should add that. It wasn't on my radar, but it is now. If you plan to work with a coach, whoever that coach happens to be, ask the questions, right? can you help me do X? Or how would you approach this particular problem? In the conversation that you have, you're very likely going to have an intake call with that particular coach. Ask them the questions that you want answers to, because they can help you. They can tell you how they would be able to support you in terms of the things that you want to achieve most. So my dear, dear friend, thank you so much for joining me again on this podcast this week. It has been wonderful to connect with you. I hope this has been an interesting and potentially eye-opening experience for you to have this conversation. And again, if there's anything I can help you with, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a LinkedIn message. You can email me. I would love to hear from you. So thanks again. Have a beautiful week, and I'll look forward to reconnecting again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.